You want to know what $52,000 sounds like? It sounds like a boat motor revving at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday evening while you're sitting in your recliner with a bum hip and an empty prescription bag. That's the sound that started all of this. That's the sound I keep coming back to. My name's Dale Whitmore, 67 years old. 31 years with the Putnam County Fire Department, most of them out of Station 4 on South Willow Avenue in Cookeville, Tennessee. The kind of work where you learn pretty fast what matters and what doesn't, because some days those two things are the only distinction keeping you alive. I retired in 2019 with a decent pension, a bad hip that had been grinding on itself about a decade longer than it should have, and a house on Gainsborough Pike that my wife Gloria and I have lived in since 1991. 3-bedroom brick ranch, nothing special, everything to us. The hip finally gave out completely last February. Bone on bone, same phrase I'd heard from 3 different orthopedic surgeons over the years, each one saying it a little more urgently than the last. Total hip replacement at Cookeville Regional. Surgery went fine. Recovery was slow the way all recoveries are slow when you're past 60, but I was doing the work. Physical therapy twice a week, keeping the weight off the joint, doing it right. About 10 days after I came home, my insurance carrier ran into some kind of processing error on my anti-inflammatory prescription. Naproxen and an antibiotic, both flagged in the same batch. Until the pharmacy benefits manager cleared it, the pharmacist at the Walgreens on Washington Avenue said it was a $175 cash or I waited. She was apologetic about it. Said these delays usually sort themselves out in a few days. A few days felt like a long time when your hip felt like it had gravel packed inside it. I wasn't broke. I want to be clear about that right now because I know how these stories go. I had savings. But they were in a CD I'd locked in for a good rate, and cracking it early meant a penalty I didn't see any reason to eat. I had a pension check coming the following Friday. It was 5 days. 5 days felt like nothing, except when the pain reminded you it wasn't nothing. So I called my son. Kyle is 39 years old, runs a landscaping and property management company down in Smithville, does well enough that he drives a truck I could never have afforded at his age. He and his wife Amber have a nice house, nice neighborhood, 2 boys who are everything to Gloria and me. I don't ask Kyle for much. I never have. In 31 years of watching houses burn down, I learned early that the things you think are permanent sometimes aren't, and the things you think will always be there sometimes aren't either. So I'd always been careful, always been independent. Asking Kyle for $175 felt like swallowing something sharp, but I did it. "Hey, it's Dad," I said. "Quick thing, my insurance has a hiccup on my prescription. I hate to ask, but could you run by the Walgreens on Washington and grab my meds? It's $175. I'll have it back to you Friday when my pension hits." There was a pause. The kind of pause that tells you the person on the other end is doing math they don't want you to know they're doing. "Ah, man, Dad. This week is just, he let that hang. We've got Amber's car payment auto-drafting, and I had some equipment costs come in that I wasn't expecting. It's really tight right now. Can you hold on a couple days?" "Sure," I said. "No problem. I'll figure it out." I said it easy. Too easy. The way you say things when you've been keeping the peace your whole life, 'cause peace felt like the safer investment. I hung up and sat in my recliner with the TV on, but not really watching it. Gloria was in the kitchen. I didn't tell her what he'd said. That same evening, around 7, she called me to the back window. "Dale, come look. Kyle's down at the marina." We live close enough to Center Hill Lake that on a clear evening you can see the public boat launch from the back edge of my property. Not the full dock, but the approach. And what I saw coming up that approach on a flatbed trailer was the kind of boat that makes you do a double take. 42 feet of gleaming white fiberglass with a center console you could cook a meal on. Bass boat, the serious kind, with 2 outboard motors that probably cost more than my first car. Kyle was driving the truck pulling it. Amber's father, Hank, was walking alongside like a man who'd just been handed something he couldn't quite believe was his. 64 years old, runs a bait and tackle shop over in Lancaster. Good man, far as I ever knew him. He had his arms out at his sides, the way people do when they're trying to take in something too big to take in all at once. Kyle pulled up, got out, and handed Hank a folder. The kind that holds documents. Title documents, I'd learn later. I watched my son put his arm around Amber's father's shoulder, and they both stood in front of that boat, like 2 men who'd just done something they were real proud of. I let the curtain fall back. Gloria was saying something behind me about how generous that was, how Hank had always wanted a boat like that. I didn't turn around. I was doing arithmetic I didn't want to do, and the numbers kept coming out the same way no matter how many times I ran them. $175 that morning, 52,000 that evening, same wallet, same week. I went back to my recliner. The anti-inflammatory is supposed to reduce swelling in the joint, so the physical therapy actually works. Without it, the sessions are harder. Not impossible, but harder. I had 2 scheduled that week. I went to both, didn't cancel a single one. I just sat with the pain a little longer each time and told the therapist I was managing fine. That night I got up after Gloria had gone to bed, went to my desk in the spare room, and opened the notebook I'd kept during my last years at the department. I still write things down sometimes. Old habit. I clicked my pen and wrote, Tuesday, March 4, Walgreens, $175, pending. I stared at the word pending for a while. Then I closed the notebook and went to bed. I want to tell you I was angry. I wasn't. Not yet. What I was quiet in a way that was different from my usual quiet. 31 years in a fire station, you learn that the men who talk the most when things go sideways are the most useless ones in the building. The ones who matter are the ones who go still. I was going still. Over the next few days, something else started happening. Kyle called twice, not to ask about the prescription, not to check on the hip. He called to talk about my retirement accounts. Hey, Dad, now that you're not working, we should probably sit down with a financial planner and make sure everything's set up the right way. Maybe consolidate things so it's easier to manage. I don't want you dealing with all that paperwork on your own. I have been managing my own finances since I was 19 years old, working 2 jobs to put myself through community college. But I said, sure, Kyle, we can talk about it. He heard agreement. I didn't mean agreement. I was starting to understand that my silence had been giving people the wrong impression of me for a very long time. Friday came, my pension hit. I drove down to Walgreens myself, paid the $175 in cash, brought the meds home, and took the full dose for the first time in 5 days. Sitting in that recliner that evening, feeling the inflammation finally start to ease off the way it was supposed to, I made myself a quiet promise. Last time, I said. That's the last time I let being polite cost me my own care. I had no idea that I was about to learn something that made the $175 feel like the least important number in this whole story. 12 days after the boat delivery, there was a knock at my front door on a Saturday morning. Not Kyle's knock. His is always fast. 2 knuckles, like he's already impatient before you answer. This was slower. Deliberate. I opened it and found Hank standing on my porch. No Amber, no Kyle, no easy smile. He had a manila envelope in one hand and the look of a man who hadn't slept particularly well. Morning, Dale, he said. Got a few minutes? Come in, I said. He didn't come in. Stood right there in the doorway and held the envelope toward me with both hands, the way you'd offer something you weren't sure you had the right to be carrying. I need you to read what's in here, he said, before you talk to Kyle about anything. I took it. Hank, what is this? He looked toward the driveway a second, then back at me. Kyle came to me last week asking me to co-sign a refinancing loan on some business equipment. I looked at the application. He stopped. Your address is listed as the principal business address for his LLC. I knew he started a company, I said. He mentioned it. Dale. Hank looked at me straight. When a business registers at an address and takes out commercial financing, the lender files what's called a UCC lien. It's attached to the address of record, your address. He nodded at the envelope. There's a copy of the filing in there. It's been on your property title for 14 months. The word title sat in the air between us, like something dropped from a height. He didn't tell you, Hank said. It wasn't a question. No, I said. He did not. Hank nodded once. I didn't co-sign the loan, and I want you to know, I had no idea any of this existed when he gave me that boat. That's not who I am, and I needed you to hear that from me directly. I know, I said, and I meant it. He walked back to his truck and drove off. I stood on my own porch holding an envelope that weighed nothing and felt like a brick. I went inside, sat at the kitchen table, opened it. The UCC financing statement was right there on page 2. Filed 14 months ago with the Tennessee Secretary of State. My address, my home, the house I've owned outright since 2008, paid off with 31 years of overtime and careful living, listed as the registered agent address for Kyle's LLC. A commercial lien on my property that I never authorized, never signed for, and never knew existed. A lien that would have to be cleared before I could sell the house, refinance anything, or transfer the property to anyone. A lien any title company would find in about 40 seconds. I sat there until Gloria came downstairs and found me at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and a stack of papers in front of me. "What is that?" she asked. "Sit down," I said. I watched her face while she read it. The color leaving it page by page, the way daylight leaves a room in winter, slow, then all at once. When she got to our address printed on the UCC filing, she put her hand flat on the table and kept it there. "He didn't ask you," she said. "No." She was quiet. "Then Dale, I don't want to lose my grandchildren over this. I mean it. I know Kyle was wrong, I know, but please don't do something that pushes them all away. Those boys are everything." "I know what those boys are," I said, to both of us. "Then please." Her voice went low. "Let's handle this quietly. Talk to Kyle, get the lien removed, and move past it. He's under so much pressure with Amber's family. He's trying to keep up with people who have more than he does. He'll make this right if you give him the chance." I looked at my wife. 38 years. I knew what it cost her to say that. I knew the fear inside it because it was sitting in my chest too. But there's a version of keeping the peace that isn't peace at all. It's just postponing the damage and paying interest on it while you wait. "Gloria," I said, "he filed a lien on this house without telling me. And then he started calling about setting up a joint account to help manage my retirement money." I let that sit for a moment. Think about the order of those two things. She didn't say anything. Her hand was still flat on the table, and I watched her knuckles go white. The following Sunday, I had Kyle and Amber over for dinner. I called Hank and asked him to come too. Didn't explain to any of them why I wanted everybody in the same room. Just said I wanted the family together. Gloria made her beef stew. The real kind, the one she's been making since before the boys were born. We ate. We talked about the kids' baseball schedule, about the weather finally turning warm, about Amber's sister buying a house down in Murfreesboro. Kyle was in a good mood, kept circling back to how we ought to get a financial planner involved, now that my retirement funds were all in one place. Maybe structure things better, take some of the weight off my shoulders. I let him finish his stew. When Gloria started to clear the plates, I asked her to sit back down. I reached under my chair and set a folder on the table, the kind my attorney in Cookeville had put together for me that week. Good firm downtown, the kind Kyle had never once imagined his quiet old father would have any reason to call. "Kyle," I said, "you've been wanting to talk about my finances, so let's do that." I opened the folder. 3 weeks ago, I filed a quitclaim deed transferring this property into an irrevocable land trust. The trust is administered by my attorney. Proceeds are designated to a scholarship fund through the Putnam County Firefighters Association for the children of career firefighters in this county. I slid one page across the table. "Your name is not listed as a beneficiary. It won't be." Kyle laughed. Short, sharp, disbelieving. "Dad, what? You can't just—" "I can, I did. I kept my voice even. And there's something else." I slid the UCC filing across. The laugh stopped. 14 months ago, you registered your business at my home address without asking me. That filing attached a commercial lien to this property. A lien I didn't authorize, didn't sign, and didn't know about until Hank brought it to my door last week. Every head at the table turned to Hank. He was sitting very still, hands folded, looking at Kyle with a particular kind of disappointment that belongs to a man who expected better and received something worse than he thought possible. "You came to me asking me to co-sign a loan using that business," Hank said quietly. "If I'd signed it, I'd have been connected to a lien on your father's house without knowing it either." He paused. "I couldn't do that, and your father didn't deserve any of this." Kyle's face did what faces do when the story a person has been telling himself stops holding together. He looked at Amber. She was staring at the papers on the table with the same expression Gloria had worn reading them that morning. The expression of someone discovering that the floor they thought was solid isn't. "This is insane," Kyle said. "Over a business address. You're blowing up our whole family over a—" "I'm doing this because you put a lien on my house without telling me," I said. "And then you drove a $52,000 boat to Hank's dock the same week you told me you couldn't spare $175 for my medication." I didn't raise my voice. I've talked people out of burning buildings. I know how to keep my voice level. I'm not doing this over a business address, Kyle. I'm doing this because when I put those two things together, I see a man who is getting ready to manage me, and I'm not available to be managed. He stood up fast, chair scraping back hard. I have kids. I have a family. You're going to do all this because of a technicality you could have just called me about? I'm not doing anything to you, I said. You built this. I'm just standing in the wreckage of it, telling you the truth. He left. Didn't slam the door. Didn't have the energy left in him for theater. He walked out and sat in his truck in the driveway for a while before he finally drove away. Amber stayed at the table a few minutes more, not saying anything. Then she thanked Gloria for dinner, soft and genuine, and left the same quiet way, the way people leave a room when they don't yet know who they're angry at. Gloria looked at me across the table after they were both gone. She didn't say anything. She just nodded once, the slow kind, the kind that means I know and I'm scared and you were right all at once. Then she started clearing the dishes. The lien was removed 6 weeks later through the attorney's office, with Kyle's cooperation. He didn't have much of a choice. The trust was already executed. My attorney had sent him a certified letter. Hank returned the boat to the dealership the week after dinner. Told the sales manager it was a gift he couldn't in good conscience keep. They charged him for the hours already on the motors. Last I heard, Kyle was working out a payment arrangement. Gloria and I still see the grandboys. Kyle dropped them off 2 Saturdays ago. He sat in the driveway while they ran up to the door, then backed out without coming in. It's not what either of us wanted for this family. But I've learned over 67 years that there's a difference between what you want and what you're willing to accept in order to get it. I'm out in my garage most mornings now. I've been rebuilding a 1968 Ford pickup I bought at an estate sale last fall, mostly for something to do with my hands since the hip finished healing. It takes patience. That's mostly what it takes. The satisfaction is in doing the thing correctly the first time and knowing it'll hold. Gloria came out to the garage last week, stood in the doorway with a dish towel over her shoulder. Kyle called, she said. He wants to come by, says he has something he wants to say to you. I kept my hands on the carburetor I was cleaning. Tell him Sunday dinner's at 6, I said. He knows where we live. She nodded and went back inside. I've been a firefighter for most of my adult life. One thing you understand pretty quickly in that work is that you cannot save every structure. Some buildings are too far gone by the time you get there. What you can do is make sure you're not standing inside one when it comes down. Kyle knows what coming through that door looks like. Whether he does it is his choice now, not mine. I finished with the carburetor, wiped my hands on a shop rag, put the radio on low, the Vols game already trailing in the third quarter. The garage smelled like oil and old metal and something I couldn't quite name. Maybe just the particular satisfaction of working on something until it runs the way it was always supposed to. I hadn't felt that in a long time. I felt it now.